think we go live in 1 minute. Can folks hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I can finally not hear the echo.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, the universe is
Dan
bending.
all along.
It was Dan who did it. That's who it was. Does anyone have their drink? Because I had a COVID shot yesterday and I feel like crap.
Oh.
But I'm here
water.
Present, and we have some hard seltzer because I'm not gonna do it up too big. But
all
I'm
right,
excited.
we're live.
Yes. I'm assuming we have. Are we live? I'm seeing, I think, 20 seconds on the. Yes, we are live. All
yeah,
right,
the live number is counting up.
Yes. All right, good people. Welcome. My name is Patrice Palmer, and I am desperately, enthusiastically excited about today's conversation. And before we get any deeper, we have to introduce these great folks. And so what I'm going to ask is name, pronouns, and just tell us one thing that got you excited today as we have folks filling in. And I'm going to let Jen start us off.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jen Jordan. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And one thing that got me excited was yesterday, because there were so many inspiring speakers. And this morning, too, just seeing all the people that I respect and hearing them be brave and speak up and tell their stories. It's inspiring.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Blanca, introduce yourself.
Blanca Quintero, she, her, hers. And same, I'm kind of excited to talk with all of y'all today and inspire some people out there like they've been inspiring us.
Awesome. And Kate?
Yes, I'm Kate Bernot, she, her, hers. I really enjoyed yesterday's presentation on digital content strategy. As a writer, that was up my alley. So there's also just been an amazing wealth of different topics, but that one was dear to my heart. So
awesome. Well, thank you all for being on this panel to talk about equity in the workplace. My name is Patrice Palmer. I use the pronouns they, them, theirs exclusively. And I have the esteemed pleasure of being the inaugural DEI specialist for New Belgium Brewing Company, as well as the director of social and cultural inclusion for the College of Business. So equity is absolutely up my alley. And I love having conversations with folks who have intersecting identities to talk about really what equity shows up for you as, and then how can we provide conversational pieces to also help other folks as they start the process of equity within their own spaces. And so today I have a couple of questions for you all, but I'm absolutely looking forward to folks from the audience also giving us questions as well. So I'm thinking around 45 minutes for us to have our conversation, and then opening the floor for another about 15 minutes so that we can get some of the guests in the room to really ask some of those real tough conversational questions that are really burning. So I'm going to start with you, Kate, for our first question. And that question is, what does equity in a brewery look and or feel like for you?
Yeah, so I'm coming at this as someone who does not nor has ever worked in a brewery. So I should state that up front. But obviously I do quite a bit of reporting on the industry and speaking to people in breweries, and a lot of that recently has focused on equity. So that's where I'm coming at this from. So I think there are two ways that I think about equity. There's the qualitative and the quantitative. So for me, qualitative is on like a person to person level. Like equity would mean that every employee, regardless of who they are, feels confident bringing them their whole selves to work and feeling like that's valued and that they have power and agency in their role, like on a person to person level. And then I think about the quantitative side, which is sort of that more structural, maybe like org chart level. Equity would mean that there is equal access to opportunities for all employees, that salaries for comparable work are equal, that power is distributed fairly and justly, and that on the whole, there's a dynamic workforce where everyone has equal access to opportunity and power within their role. So
absolutely.
I think about
Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely. And I thank you for giving that, as well as kind of giving us the insider look at what equity even means. Sometimes we hear these words and we're like, yeah, we have that, but we never really dissect what it means and how it shows up for the individual as well as for the organizational. So thank you so much for kind of giving us that qualitative and quantitative reasoning behind that. Blanca, same question.
I've been thinking about it in terms of like the person to person, just ensuring that sometimes when you bring in folks that maybe diversify the workforce, they may have some kind of foundational, they're maybe not at the same level as other people. It might be a language issue, which is something that I came across recently with some of our bilingual employees, where if we're presenting a class on beer education and maybe they're not so great with their English language, not that they wouldn't understand what the class was teaching, we need to make sure that we're providing different resources for something that it would be more approachable, especially if there's issues with language, or, I mean, it could be a variety of different things, but that was a recent one where, you know, we want to make sure that everyone has that equal access. And if there isn't that possibility, what we can do to adjust and make sure that they're included and part of the culture of the brewery itself, and not that disparity of, you know, they won't ever feel as part of it because of that difference.
Absolutely. And I love how you brought into account a quote that I heard in grad school from Atento, and it was, access without support is not opportunity. And so you talked about that from the language piece, right? Like, okay, we want you in the space, we need you in the space, but we haven't given you the access to actually utilize the space in a way that's going to provide opportunity for you. So we have to recognize that. And I appreciate you so much for bringing that into this conversation around how access also has to be very, very intentional, right? It just can't be like, oh, we opened the door, so just run through. There needs to be some type of intentionality behind it. Jen, same question.
Yeah, when I was first thinking about, well, I've been thinking about this for a while, but I was trying to switch my brain and think about it, you know, is it as an employee or as you know, a visitor to a brewery? But I think what I really need to do is think about it from, you know, my identity, and I think that's part of what you're asking us to do. So, you know, equity in a brewery or any workplace, everyone has access to the tools and the resources that they need, whether that's, you know, training or, you know, like professional development opportunities, the images and the names and language that are, you know, in the place, people see themselves represented. And, you know, I was thinking too, just as, you know, from an employee perspective, like, where are these, you know, these jobs getting posted, you know, or people just giving them to their friends? How do you reach out to make sure that everybody even knows that this, you know, position or opportunity exists? And I think, you know, I can't think about the word equity without thinking about money. That just, I know that's not what we're talking about right now, but equity, you know, another definition is like equity, like what can you get out of it? In order, there has to be a lot of support in place. And I think a lot of times, well, for myself as a queer woman and being middle-aged, sometimes it's tough to feel like you always belong. And I know that's true for I know that's true for a lot of people.
Absolutely. And thank you also for bringing in the economic piece of it. Because when we think about inclusion, somehow money is always like the last thing we talk about, right? Like, oh no, we've given you the access, but that support a lot of times does come in the form of equity and value and belonging, that investment that happens. And again, that's how you get to the opportunity piece. If you don't have the support, then the access is really not going to be as deep and as heartfelt as you intend it to be. And a part of that is having the resources to be able to give that economic stability as well. So thank you so much for bringing that into the space and really, jumping in with the first question pretty deep. So my next question is, what does that actually look like? Because I think that's a big thing that people ask, right? It's like, okay, it's well and good that we have this access. It's well and good that you have all these opportunities in this buffet of what we consider support. But how do folks actually individually as well as organizationally enact that in order to bring about the change that they really want to see? So I'm loving, Blanca, if you can start us off to really dig deep into that piece for us.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot because I think that foundationally, people think about this topic in terms of just equality, which is not the same thing. And often, I recently had a conversation about this, just like, how do you diversify a brewery? But it's more complicated than that because, as was already mentioned, you can bring people in, but if they don't mesh with the culture, or there's still some sort of, there has to be some things in place to make sure that people feel included if they're coming from a different background. And I think that's just been a hot topic in the beer world in the past year. But I think it looks like, at least I hope we're on the right track, listening and making sure that everybody's voice is heard. And I feel like that is one of the first things that I know of the employees that feel like they're not being listened to and they're not being included. I think, you can say that you're doing these things, but if people still feel that way, it obviously isn't rolling out as you think it is. So it's like being very aware of how your attempts are being perceived by the staff. Or, to Jen's point as well, talking about customers, are customers feeling like they are being welcomed? You might think you are setting up a space where people feel like they can be, they're in a safe space, but that might not always be the case. And you might not know until something blows up in your face. So I think it is very much like, you have to look past what you think you're doing, because if you don't check in and see that your progress is actually being made, you're just kind of being very superficial about it. And I fear that happens a lot when people are trying to build these types of programs in at least specifically in their breweries.
Absolutely. It's the performative, right? Jumps in. Even without us actually trying to do that, it becomes performance because there's no research that's going into it. The intentionality is very much superficial and we're not able to dig through the process. Why? Because we are a society of instant gratification. Like, I want to see it tomorrow that you've made the change, but they do not understand that the infrastructure actually has to be there in order to do that. You can bring a bunch of Black folks in, but if you don't keep them, you have not done anything. So again, I think I love that you brought that point into it, is that what you think you're doing and what you're actually doing may not actually equal out. The same with equality and equity. Jen, how do you feel about this?
Well, I was just thinking about the idea of, like, what is the company culture already, and your plan to build equity and include all in your business. And I'm not a business owner, but I know that if what you want to look like and you don't do the work, like you said, to build a structure to hold it in place, it's just going to fall apart. And anything you think you look like you just did, it's just going to dissolve, because you're not starting, from the ground up and building a wide base for it all. Yeah, like if we're just do this work and it's like a checklist and you're like, oh, I checked these boxes and put that list over there, even if you did check all the boxes, like that list itself is going to be outdated in like 2 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, so you get a new list,
Yes. That's absolutely true. It gets outdated real quick especially when you're aiming to do that, right? And people are too nuanced to fit in boxes. I don't fit in boxes, and so please don't add me to your demographic data because I'm gonna mess it all up. I'm gonna skew everything, and we have to think about that intentionally. That folks are they're not pretty packages that we could just say this is what you are and continue moving forward. Kate, how do you feel?
Yeah, I think something that I'm hearing everyone else say that feels very true is that like the onboarding is not the end goal. That's like the very beginning of it, right? Like, cool, you hired whichever person you wanted to hire. Like, that is step one. That is not the end goal. And what I think about when we talked about like, what does this concretely look like in an organization? When I think about, newsrooms that I'm a part of, publications I write for, editorial teams I'm a part of, like when you bring in new voices, it should change your organization. Like you should not look the same, months, a year after these new voices come in. Like that should make you different as an organization. And if it's not, then I think you're not listening. So I think that's a good barometer is like, are we a different organization than we were 6 months, a year ago? And if we're not, what are we missing potentially?
So basically you just said, if you're not changing, then you know that you're more than likely not hitting your mark, because I think that's a hard thing for people to have to understand, right? Is the fact that in order for you to honestly build the equity that you want, there has to be change. And it has to be linked to some type of intentionality. There has to be a goal, right? What is your goal? Is your goal just to change the color of it? Is the goal just to make sure that there is a balance of gender? What is your goal, and how does that actually affect what you're going to do? Because I don't think I could have said it any eloquently. Like if you're not changing, then you're not growing and you're not doing what you think you are doing, because nothing is actually different than what it was before. The next one, I think this actually speaks to something that we've actually had conversation about, and I think is also really hard for people at times to really dig deep in. And that is, how does one handle situations of inequity in a way that leads to an equitable solution, if that is even possible? Is that something that we could actually do? Jen, how do you feel?
Well, I feel that it's you have to focus on the policy that is, it's really easy to look at people and say, this is problematic, this person did this and this person did that, to me or to this person I support. But I think in the end, well, not in the end, in the beginning, like what are the policies? What are the practices? What structure is in place? And is it, those are the things that if you focus on policy and the things that are in print, like this is how we do it, like, that policy could be excluding a lot of people. And I think focusing on the policy and saying this is problematic to whoever created the policy or whoever, as a group can change it is a place to start. And, definitely not putting that all on one person. And, because it needs to be a community agreement about, the policy change. And then that way you can avoid people getting defensive and, just shutting down, because then you can't move on.
Kay, how do you feel?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of what I've observed work for different organizations is what Jen is saying, is like not making this any one person's job to like be the equity police and point out inequity in your organization, but to have them feel like there's strength in numbers and that they have support, whether, that might not be their direct manager, but it could be someone laterally within the organization, or even like a vendor that, works closely with this organization, something like that. I think the more you can develop support behind you raising this issue of inequity, that always seems helpful. And I think also to present it, depending on the severity of what you're witnessing, to present it as an opportunity to make things better for everyone. Like, hey, if we change this, if we fix this, this would make my life better, my job better, and it would make our organization stronger. Like, we would be a better business if we address this. I think that shows that it's not just like a personal grievance, but like, I am bringing this up as an organizational critique, and that we could benefit from addressing this and like be a better company.
Absolutely. Blanca.
I for some reason started thinking about this more as like if you have like a toxic working environment, how do you fix that? And I think that sometimes like higher ups maybe aren't aware that there's a problem with the culture, and if enough, it's kind of like bringing that awareness and kind of a solution to that type of problem. I think usually just in and of itself is like, I wasn't aware that this is a problem. No one said anything before. And it may be because most of the people that have worked there never saw it as a problem until, again, you start bringing in new people with different experiences, different backgrounds, and you realize it's a problem. I think that there's a lot of growth that can come from finding these inequities and trying to solve those problems. So I would hope that you can go from one to the other, and just kind of use that as, it does. Ultimately, if you have a happy workplace, you have a better business, you tend to be more successful, you have happy customers, service industry specific. And I think that, it's very much, this whole, I hate to just focus on this, but like the boys club kind of a thing in breweries, like forever, it wasn't seen as a problem. And that's because no one said anything until somebody starts speaking up. And it's hard to be the one person, but it's true. If you have a few people, or you bring it in a way that it's like, are you aware that this may be problematic? I think that ultimately helps turn people around and be more aware of what they're doing. Because for a long time, for years, people haven't seen that this was an issue and how this can be a dividing factor in the workplace. And I think that, being able to be that support, if you know that, even if it's one person, but of course, if it's a few people that see this problem, it's definitely time to reconfigure some things and see what it is that's an issue and turn it around.
Absolutely. And thank you for bringing into this space the thought about when you name something, it's not divisive to name it. It is responsible, right? Like, in order for us to move, we have to know what we're moving away from and what we're moving to. And a lot of times it seems like folks are taken back by that. One, because it's been normalized, right? It's been normalized that this is the way that we have been successful. And now you're telling me I have to change. Change is so scary for folks, because at some point folks think that somebody's going to get left out. Like, when a family changes, then all of a sudden you get this new kid, right? And it's like, it doesn't make the other kids less. It's just you're expanding the family. There's a more of an expansion that is happening, which is going to make our unit stronger. And I think that's something that folks honestly forget. And I think we also honestly forget that women have been fighting for the right for equity. It's only been within the last 60, maybe 65 years that right has been honored. This is still pretty new. My grandma is in her 80s, so this is still pretty new as far as what has happened, what is happening, and then what will happen. And I don't think that we recognize that we are, again, a part of this process. It is an absolute process for us to get to something different. I want to throw in, because I saw a question pop up that seems like it tied in directly with what we've been talking about. And so I'm throwing this out to the group, throwing it off a little, throwing off script just a little bit. So any one of you just jump in and answer the question. What ideas or thoughts do you have about the tension between equity effort and workplace environments that are hierarchical in structure? And I think you touched on this, but I want to know if we can go just a little bit deeper. And anyone is welcome to start the conversation.
I'll jump in. I think there is a startup mentality that anti-hierarchy level playing fields are level playing fields. And I think actually a lack of definition and hierarchy and responsibilities can often be exploited in ways that serve existing social hierarchies. Because if there is not organizational structure in place to say that, no, this person in leadership has these responsibilities, then it's open to kind of anyone. It kind of becomes a free-for-all, and it tends, I think, to default back to the hierarchies we're all used to. So I actually think at times defined roles and defined responsibilities and job titles can actually be a source of power for people who don't normally have it. Not all the time. These are not hard and fast rules, but I think sometimes, a vacuum can be a very dangerous thing, and not spelling things out can be very dangerous, not having policies and clear guidelines. So I am wary of smashing a hierarchy all to bits. But of course, that hierarchy that you put, or whatever structure you put in place at your job, has to be based on sound practices and whatnot. But I am skeptical of throwing the whole playbook out.
Okay. Anyone else?
Well, Patrice, you said something before about, naming it and saying, this is a thing, this could be a problem, and having time actually set aside as part of the structure of the work community too. Do you have team meetings? Do you have do you even set aside time to, do we set aside time to have conversations that are difficult and that are uncomfortable, and that, being uncomfortable and having these difficult conversations, you have to build it into the structure of the work environment. So many people are like, oh, it's all beer, it should just be fun. But, sometimes it's not. And when it's not, and someone says this ain't fun, we all have to listen, even though, we might want to,
right.
No, it's fun. It's beer. It's just fun. But you know what? Yeah. So having that time to have, the conversation, and, for employees to, give feedback to their supervisors. It shouldn't be a one-way street.
Absolutely. And as you were talking about, beer is fun. The first thing I go to in my head is beer is absolutely fun, but it must be partaken in responsibly, right? There's still a responsibility in even how we are utilizing beer. If we're consuming it, we still have to do it responsibly. There still has to be an intentionality around it. And so, yes, it is fun, but it is at its best when it is responsible, and it is taken with some type of intentionality. And so I think we can still walk into the space with that exact same thought process. Blanca, did you have anything to add to this particular question?
I kind of forgot what the most of the question was, but what was sticking out was tension and hierarchy.
Yes. That's good.
So
Great.
I definitely see that that's like an ongoing problem where people feel like they are getting taken out of their comfort zone. You know, these systems have been in place, and when those systems are being challenged, there's automatically this kind of fight or flight reaction. And I think that there has to be some sort of balance between those two things. Like, it can't be all of a sudden, but again, none of these things can be sudden because you need the proper structures in place and the proper foundations to be able to grow these new ideas and new programs. But I think that it was very, just sitting on those two words, it's like tension and hierarchy. It just says so much more, I think, than we have time for today. But I thought it was very poignant because that's exactly what happens every time you see somebody promoting, there was Marcus earlier talking about Black is Beautiful. It's just like, oh my God, the reaction to so many people feeling that was a direct threat, and it's like, that is not a threat. It's somebody else having a voice, and I feel like that's basically the recurring theme. It's like, why does somebody else having a voice or being brought up to be here equal to you such a big problem for you? And it's obviously they feel threatened and all these different things. But there's just so much, that you can go into with that. And, because it's true. It's like how, you're trying to develop a space with an equity and that sort of formality, but it's like, how do you make sure that these other people that are in power or already where they aren't feeling like they're being diminished? I mean, I guess that's what they feel. I mean, obviously that's not what's happening. It's more like, I'm bringing you up to me, you're not coming down, but
No, I think that's a really hard for folks to talk through, right? And I think part of it is we don't really know how to name it. We know that what it feels like, but we don't really know, we don't know how to articulate where those feelings are coming from and what we're really trying to say. And I think when we think about equity, that fairness, it is only fair to remove barriers for everyone. That is fair. However, there are some folks who are like, well, I had a barrier and I jumped over it. So why do you got to remove it? If I jumped over it, why do we now have to remove it? And that is honestly because we recognize that barrier, you should have never had to jump over it. And that's something that folks are not like, oh, like what I did actually should not have taken place. The hardships that I had to go through actually should not have been there. And that is something that a lot of folks are starting to have that type of conversation, particularly around inclusion. When we think about what is inclusion, is that we're trying to remove these barriers that should have never been there in the first place, but now need to be removed in order to ensure that more and more people have access. That's that access that is given the support that now breeds opportunity for folks. And so I have another question because folks are giving me questions and I'm like, no, we got to get the questions out. There's some really awesome ones out here. So again, open to anyone jumping in on this. And so this question, it looks like it's a couple of parts. So forgive me if I pause and then add some more. But as an industry, do you think it would be beneficial to employ an ombudsman sort of situation for complaints against administration? In the past, it seems that individual HR departments haven't been very receptive to inequity issues, gender, race, etc. And they tend to be dismissive. The question is, do we need an overarching organization to be able to deal with these issues? And I'm assuming that the person is asking in-house. What are your feelings about that?
I'm sorry if I cut anybody off. I think about this often because I've worked in like corporate breweries and small breweries, and I've also worked in the corporate world, and HR departments are like the last thing that people hire in a brewery, it feels like. And sometimes the person that has the reins over the HR department may be the owner, or it may be one of the, one of the managers. And it doesn't feel like maybe HR issues are addressed in the best manner. But then when you deal with corporate HR, you have the HR department basically functioning to protect the brewery at all costs. and it's not necessarily for the individual. And I think a lot of the things that we've seen, rise up in the past couple of years with these sort of problems in breweries, it's like they don't think about how HR was a necessity, and then it's kind of like backpedaling. But then I think there has to be some sort of neutral, and I don't know if that's something that can exist within the brewery, if it's like somebody that's outsourced and has more of a no kind of investment in the resolution of the issue. But there's definitely something to be said for that, because that continues to be a problem. And I can see why that would be the case, because if you have a small, your brewery's 15 or less people, and one of those people is HR, you don't know how they're going to respond to your claims of all sorts of issues. And there might be a need to have maybe an outside organization be involved and be able to address these issues before it becomes a lawsuit, because that basically is what keeps happening.
I reported a story for Craft Beer and Brewing's Brewing Industry Guide, in which I spoke to essentially an HR, a lawyer who deals with employment and HR issues. And she was talking about sort of the basics of anti-harassment and anti-discrimination policies for small breweries. And something we talked about was this sort of, who do you bring complaints to in a small brewery where the owner is the HR department? And she suggested that there are anonymous reporting services. One is called All Voices, and it's something your employer could sign up for this service. The drawback there is that it can impede then your brewery's ability to investigate those complaints if they don't know where they're coming from. And again, in maybe a small enough brewery, it's obvious if there's 5 employees who this is coming from. And that's a tension too. It's like, okay, I want to bring this up, but I don't want this associated with me. Well, there's 5 of us, so obviously. So I don't have answer. I don't think anyone has figured out the answer yet. And it's like every tool has a pro and a con, and you just, I think, would have to figure out what problems you're trying to solve with those tools, and are you willing to deal with the drawbacks to them?
My next question, and we'll go back to folks who've been dropping questions and continue dropping questions into the chat. But one thing I would love to hear from your own lived experiences is, how does one advocate for oneself, and how do you do that for someone else? How do you advocate for yourself, and then how do you do that for someone else? And I'll open it. Anyone can start this conversation.
I'll go. Patrice, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I was like, oh, I'm so shitty at advocating for myself. I have no idea what I'm going to say. And then I thought about it, and I've spent so much time, trying to say, I can do this, I can do that, I can do this, I can do that, thinking that that's self-advocacy by always saying, oh, I got this, I got that, I can do it. Yeah, I'll do it. What, somebody forgot to do that again? No problem, I'll do it. And then I've realized recently that self-advocacy can be saying, no, I won't do that. And when you say, no, I won't do that, it's creating a huge amount of space for you to recognize your own needs and to work on the things that you've already decided that are important for you. So just being able to hold space for yourself, could take your whole life to do that, to just be like, no, that's not me. And also advocate for yourself. People always expect you to have this response, like so quickly, like, just taking the time you need to really think about it and have a thoughtful response in a situation. So you can respond, and share your truth and not have it be reactionary, I think, is a way of self-advocacy. And like I've seen people say this so many times, like yesterday, like just stop apologizing. You are who you are, do it, be it. And also, and if it includes saying, no, it's not, necessarily, I can't do that, but I won't, and saving your space in that way.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Absolutely.
I'll go. I was thinking of how do I advocate for others, and I think that I've become a little scrappy in how I've gotten to where I've gotten to in my beer career. I think that more so means like I fight for myself because no one else will sometimes. So I feel like I do that for other people. Like I try to make sure if somebody feels like they want to do something, I support them, and then I support them to whoever can help them along in their career or journey if I'm able to. And I feel like it's like something I didn't exactly have. So I feel like I'm become like this mother hen where I'm trying to do it for other people. Because I think sometimes we suffer in silence with certain things and certain struggles, and I don't want other people to experience that if I can help it. So I've recently just giving other people a voice if I can, and fighting for other people to get somewhere and not having them feel hopeless, like they won't be heard or they won't get to where they want to go to, or if they're afraid, just giving that encouragement and confidence. I think it helps a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like I observe that it's easier for people to advocate for others than themselves, especially if you are a woman or a member of another underrepresented group in the brewing industry that's been culturally discouraged from advocating for yourself. So when it comes to myself, sometimes I try to think, what advice would I give someone who wasn't me in my position? Like someone offers me a writing job and it like doesn't pay what I think it should, but I'm struggling to say no to it for whatever reason. It's like, what would I tell someone, another writer in this position? I'd be like, no, tell them this is my value. And like, if you can't meet that, then I'm really sorry. Like or not even, I'm sorry, I can't do this work. It seems like like we're just not aligning on this. And I hope you find someone else to do it. It's not, that's the advice I would give someone else. So sometimes I just have to take my own advice. And then as far as advocating for others, I think it's always powerful for people to put things in their own words. So I try where possible I would always rather see someone advocate for themselves than someone advocate on their behalf. So yielding the floor where I can, like, just maybe it's someone else's turn to talk. Maybe it's not my turn to talk right now, which is really hard for me. I love talking. So but I'm working on it. I'm working on just being like, I don't have to answer. You know what? Someone else can speak on this question. That it's not for me to say. One day I'll get there. So.
That's real. I'm the same way. Step up, step back. I'm still learning how that shows up. But one of the things that I thought about even with this question was, as a Black, queer, non-binary, transgender person, I was socialized as a Black woman. I was socialized. And so those socializations bring with itself its own intersectionality of how I advocate for myself and then how I advocate for other folks. And I know because of those intersecting identities, I will go hard for other people. Like I'm willing, like what do you need me to do? Like, do you need me to quit? Like, I'm ready for that for somebody else. But when it comes to me, I'm like, I can deal with that. That's fine. It's not, I've been through worse, right? Everything that happens to me, I'm like, is this the worst I've ever experienced? Probably not. So I could probably deal with it because it's not the worst. I've been through the worst and I've exceeded my own expectation. So this is not as bad. But I have not until in 10 days, I will be 38 years old. I am still figuring out in my life that no is a complete sentence. I don't have to give you a backstory when I say no. That is so hard. That is so hard to do. Honestly, because I'm like, but you need to know the context of why I'm saying no. Because I want you to feel okay with the no that I'm providing you, instead of me being okay with the no that I have to give. And when I say have to, it's because if I don't do this, I am not going to advocate for myself. And therefore, if I cannot do this for myself, I am not doing it to the best of my ability for someone else. Because I don't even know how to do it. I don't follow my own rules. So how am I telling other people to do this, right? And so, like, no is its own sentence. It does not require a backstory. You don't need to give context. I don't need to make you feel good by giving you my boundaries. Like that actually is not something I have to give you, right? And so that is something I'm still learning because of my socialization, because of my intersecting identities. I am still learning that it is okay, and I am not being rude. I am not being all the other explicatives that come with anyone who speaks up for themselves. I am not engaging in that because I am preserving my own self-worth. No, that is not. Because again, as I talked about at the beginning, infrastructure. It's no way that no one who shares my salient identities is going to be able to thrive in this space if I am not also enacting the same change that I say I want to see. And so sometimes that is me saying, no, I won't take this. Not because I can't do it, but because I don't want to overextend myself, and hurt myself in the process of making you look better. Because that's really what we're doing. Like, you take on all these 50 projects, you're making somebody else look good. You really are. And so being able to be content with that and being able to unlock some of that own socialization that I have been given, and it's heavy and I don't want it anymore. And so I love the responses of, yeah, sometimes I'm really good at it and sometimes I'm not. It's a process. And we have to understand that every day we're getting better at it, but it has to be something you do every day in order to continue to strengthen yourself. Time on attention is what makes muscles grow. And so the more time and the more we stretch ourselves, the bigger we become at being able to do some of the things that we didn't know we could do. And with that, I want to continue to open it up to the floor. We have 4 questions that popped in. I want to hopefully get to all of them. So again, the space is thrown out for you all to jump on these questions as you see fit. All right. The next question is, are there any benchmarks that you would consider necessary for an equitable workplace if you were job hunting or looking to do a collaborative project? So again, any benchmarks that you would consider necessary for an equitable workplace, specifically if you're job hunting or looking for a collaborative project?
I can't really think of benchmarks. I just know that if you want to collaborate with someone or you're considering doing work with someone, that definitely sit down and have a conversation about what your goals are, what you want to do, for sure. And definitely do your research or talk to somebody else who works there, maybe not the one who might be making the decision about the hiring or about the project, but find out about the company culture, find out if that's something you want to be part of. I think a lot of us, especially if you're trying to get into the industry, will just say, oh, these people said yes, they want me, on paper or whatever, or they want any of us. And then, but you get there and it's like, wait a minute, so again, it's like the saying no, but also, and the advocating for yourself. Like, I don't think there's not necessarily a benchmark. Like you decide that. I think you have to get in there and see what it feels like if there's some an environment you want to work in. Don't just say yes to the first thing that comes up because they, invited you. I mean, that's not a benchmark, but.
I think I've seen recently, just like does the company have an discriminatory on their website or a code of conduct or something like that, or who do they, if they do nonprofit giving, what type of organizations do they align themselves with? Are they active in their community in certain ways? I think there are little things that maybe we overlook because we think everybody has an anti-discrimination policy, but that's not exactly the case. I think those are like very basic things that a company should have, maybe. And smaller companies, smaller breweries, maybe startup like merchandise kind of beer people may not have those in place because it's one or two people. But I think those are becoming kind of like, do they have these basic things? And then will I want to align myself with that company or be associated with them?
Yeah, those are great points. And also I would to add to what Blanca was saying, like if they don't have something like an anti-discrimination policy and you ask about it, how do they react to that? Are they like super defensive and like freaked out that you asked about it? Or are they like, oh, wow, that's a great point. Like, that's something we should have. Wow. Like, because that shows you how they're going to accept your input moving forward, potentially. Like, how are they going to collaborate with you and how much are they listening to your voice when you point out basic, things that are important to you? I would say that's something I look for in workplaces or collaborators is like, how are they valuing the things that are important to me? Are they asking what's important to me? Are they asking what I want to do and what my goals are? And if it's all about what I can do for them, like, that makes me nervous. Gives me a little pause.
No, that's real. That's real. With our last 9 minutes, I may not be able to get to every question that has been asked, but we truly, truly appreciate your engagement. And hopefully throughout this time, you'll be able to connect with one of the folks on this panel or myself to hopefully, if that question is burning for you to be able to get that answered. So again, we apologize that we weren't able to get to every question, but absolutely appreciate the question. And if you're willing and able, I think I have my email out there to follow up with folks if that's something that they would like to have. But this question is for the entire panel. Again, any of you can start off the conversation, but I really would love for you, as we close our conversation out, what advice would you give an individual or organization who is new to this equity work? What would they need to do to start the fire? Because we know people are at differing levels of this work. They have differing populations of people that they're serving. But we would love from your intersecting identities to talk about what advice would you be able to give them individually as well as an organization. So we're going to do two.
I think that, even in preparing for this panel, like doing the proper research for person, like what is it that, what is equity? Like if you are very much starting off, like make sure you do your proper research. And if you have the networking capabilities, like emailing somebody like Patrice and seeing, see who you have as a resource and tapping into those people. Because I think that, and then going into like the organization, I think sometimes people are kind of expected to take on these roles because maybe they are a minority in the company, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the proper background in it. And I think that's very important. I think that sometimes that's looked past with this work, and that puts a lot of pressure. Not only are you already kind of the odd person out, but now you're also kind of expected to like, hey, can you drive our D&I, expectations because you are part of that. That's not helpful, because you do need to make sure that as a company, you're including the right people that already have that experience. And if you're starting the journey, make sure you do that research to find out who those right people are, and if you are understanding what this whole thing actually is about.
First of all, how dare you say that? Because it's just like all the bells and whistles. I'm like, yeah, it's the same way with any other job, right? Just because you like numbers does not make you an accountant or a financier. It just doesn't. So when you think about that from folks who have marginalized identities, just because you hold that identity does not mean that you have the bandwidth. I'm not even going to talk about the academic prowess or anything like that. Like, physically, you may not be able to hold on to the emotional baggage that comes with teaching folks how to respect, care, and have compassion for people that look like you. That may just not be something you can do right now. And that is something that is often overlooked because of the scarcity, right? You're the only one. Yes, you. Come do this. Make sure you can do this, but not giving resources, not giving support. Again, is that an opportunity, or is that just a job that you're giving me? It's not really an opportunity for growth for the organization, nor for me as an individual doing this type of work. So I think that's something that folks often forget. And that is something that I think my first day on the job at New Belgium, I said, I hold these identities, but I have also been trained to do this type of work. That does not mean that other people who look like me can deal with you at the place in your own development that you are right now. Everybody can't deal with that. So they may not respond to you the way that I respond, because I recognize this is both my lived experience and also a part of my work. And so that was like the first day that I was on the job that I said that, because I recognized that was something that people were coming in and saying, oh, well, I had a conversation with Patrice and Patrice didn't get this angry. So obviously you can't get this angry. And it's like, no, that's not how that works. So thank you so much for bringing that into the space. I'm sorry for interjecting, but that was like that was a visceral moment for me.
Something I see breweries and actually writers be pretty good at is when they don't know how to do something, but they see someone else doing it well, like being able to ask. Like I see breweries do this all the time with, like, I don't know, canning line QC or something like that. Like, I can't get my dissolved oxygen levels down. Like, how are you doing it? I think, why are we not doing that with inclusion work potentially? Like, if there are people that you admire and seem to be knowledgeable in this particular space, ask them, what are you working with an organization that's helping you do this? Are you leading this internally? Like, how are you doing this? I mean, we do that for other aspects of our jobs. This is also an important workplace goal. And I think, from what I've seen of the industry, people are very willing to knowledge share and point to what resources have helped them. So if you see a brewery that you feel like is doing a great job, or an organization that's doing a great job, be like, how'd you do that? Yeah.
I was just thinking about how, if someone's beginning work around equity, that being a beginner is a perfectly fine place to be. And don't let that feeling of being a beginner make you think that, like there's just too much, and that, you don't start because, when you're a beginner, there's endless possibility there, and you can be more eager and open, and there may be some anxiety about it, but if you feel like you're not alone in starting this work, and you build a structure and a team around it, and like you all were saying, you're not doing it alone. You can make some lasting change and like sustain it, because it's part of your strategy within your company. And also too, like being owning your difference and what your perspective is, and know that brings a lot. That lens brings a lot to how you see the work that needs to be done. And that's okay too. You don't have to, different people on your team are going to have different perspectives on how to get the work done. And that makes for a better team.
Yeah, I think it's great. One of the points that you brought in, Jen, specifically, it has to be a part of you. Like it's really hard to start equity work when it isn't a part of your makeup as an organization. It's not a part of your value system. It is not a part of your mission to actually do it. It becomes harder because it's harder to actually to articulate what you're trying to do because it's not a part of you. And it also makes it harder to then give that to the rest of the folks who work with you and for you, because they're like, well, all of a sudden this came out of nowhere. What are we talking about? We've never talked about this before. So that's a really big thing that has to be talked about. And if it's not a part of the strategy today, this is a great time. Today is a great day to change. It's an absolutely great day to change. It's Sunday. Hopefully in your area is bright and sunny. If it's not, it's still a day that you can actually make change. And so we can do that today if it's not a part. But it has to be, because that's how you grow. If you have no direction, it doesn't, it's just a dream. It's just a dream. You have to have a plan, and it has to have a direction to it. And you have to have a goal to get to. Make it low and then strive. But you gotta have somewhere to go. And so one of the things I like to do when having this type of conversation with folks is to think about where do we go from here now, right? So the things that have come up in this conversation is educate, build your knowledge base. Like Kay said, have you just talked to each other? We talk over beer all the time. Talk about the strategies that you're doing that has helped, that has worked. And most importantly, the stuff that don't do well. Like actually ask that question. What has not worked? So that I am not replaying the exact same trauma that you just figured out is absolutely hurting people. And make sure that you educate. Expose yourself by being vulnerable, naming what is going on, naming where you want to be, and actually putting a plan into action to get to that experience. You have to have a process, and you have to understand that this is a process. And just like every process, there are twists and turns and kinks and bumps, everything. Just like when you are trying to make a fabulous beer, you are brewing it to perfection, shit happens, and you'll be like, that was not supposed to do that. What do? Do you scrap it and just be like, yeah, we're never going to make that. I'm not going to ever brew beer again. No, you go back to the drawing board. What didn't work? What do I need to change so I can perfect this, so that the essence of what we thought we were going to do actually translate into what people are actually consuming? All right. And then I would say, and I think, Blanca, you definitely brought this up on several, is to edify people. Believe them and uplift and build with them. When you have folks who are in your space saying, hey, I am being traumatized, I am having this issue, believe them. To believe somebody is not condemning someone else. It is just an opportunity to validate. It validates where they're coming from, and it allows your eyes to be open so that you can now say, okay, now I know what to look for. I didn't know what to look for before, but if you don't edify the person in the space, you're never going to get to that point. So with that, I thank each and every one of you for having this conversation. This is not a conversation that happens all the time. I mean, it's the Women's International Beer Summit. So that right there, look at you being revolutionary. I love it. I love being a part of it. And thank you for providing some things in this space for all of us to learn from, no matter how we identify as in our gender or in our expression. You've given us something that humans can actually work with other humans to do better. So thank you so much for the great work that you have done, what you are doing, and the positionality that you've put yourself in to continue to do that good work. Thank you for that. Thank you for everyone who was able to listen to us today and have this type of conversation. Continue to do the good work. Even if it feels like you're the only one, I guarantee you are not. And reach out to the folks, like people on this panel, like folks who are part of this summit, to continue to sharpen yourselves so you can continue to do the good work. With that being said, I offer a cheers to you all. And I will see you at the next event it's probably already started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrice.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Blanca, Kate.